Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. I hope the weekend was good. It was sunny here in Buffalo, as you can tell by my pink complexion, because I go right from pink to white. But now it's back into the 30s or 40s, and I think they said we were going to get snow today, which, it's just schizophrenic.
I know we're going to get a little colder weather this week in the 50s and stuff, but snow, wow.
Yeah. Can I also say, okay, I don't dislike Star Wars movies. I actually liked the first trilogy. I thought the second trilogy was,
That's an original.
Right. But this May the 4th we be with you crap.
It's fun for people, Mike. Like, come on.
Gee, it's just so lame.
It
really is.
Fun. It's people who watch Star Wars their whole lives and like it.
I'll tell you what
wrong with it.
I'll tell you what was less lame than that. Watching yesterday a bunch of hockey reporters and celebrities on Zoom, or I think it was on
Zoom.
Yeah, doing
on Twitch, but on Zoom.
But on Twitch, doing a flip cup tournament. I thought that was more entertaining than May the 4th be with you.
I saw the highlights. I actually donated because I thought Jillian would bring home the gold, and she did not. So I basically messaged her and said,
who ended up winning?
Jesse Blackburn.
Oh, Pete Blackburn.
No, not Pete Blackburn. It was Jesse somebody.
Okay.
Who the hell knows? Once Jillian lost, I was just like, whatever. I basically messaged her and said it was the same as the 2010 Flyers. Like, no different.
Well, I gave our friend Tara Sloan the Sicilian curse because I said, I'm putting my money on you, and she lost.
Yeah, but you didn't even put any money, so you're
no, but it was symbolic. I don't make enough money to put money on anything.
It was symbolic. I put $5. God. But anyhow, Jillian didn't win. Let's talk about Don Shula and the man with known integrity. Now, he may have had integrity in real life. He seemed like a nice guy. I'm not going to argue any of that. But in 1983, when there was torrential rains in Florida, he was just like, oops, for the AFC Championship game, the tarp wasn't left on. Sorry, fellas. Like,
no, what year was that? Was that 82?
83 AFC Championship game.
So what he did was he learned from what happened to him in New England.
Right, where he threw a fit.
Right.
So he did that. And it compromised the whole game. Matter of fact, Alan Ellis, who is a really good Flyers fan, but also a former New Yorker, on my Facebook page basically said he was at that game, and it was torrential rain the night before. He said that field was literally underwater.
It was a bog, yeah.
No, it was underwater. Like, it wasn't even a bog. It was. That's how bad it was, and it didn't even get close to dry until the second half, where it was just completely muddy. I have a feeling in today's day they would have canceled that game, and they would have redone it. And they probably would have fined Shula. But instead, that's what they did. Following back, Richard Todd was 7th in the league in passing that year. And the Jets had fast receivers. And Shula, knowing that his field was going to be like that, was able to prepare for it. Now, of course, it was the A.J. Dewey game, and you can't prepare for those kinds of interceptions for touchdowns. But at the end of the day, it's a supreme advantage to have when you're going in there thinking, okay, it's not raining today. Passing game is going to be good, and then all of a sudden the field is just garbage. So that's my feeling on Don Shula.
Yeah, well, I have mixed feelings when it comes to Shula because when I was growing up in the mid to late 70s as a younger kid, we were well aware of the complete and utter domination of the Dolphins.
Yeah, I watched that season. I did.
Over the Bills. We're talking. The Bills did not beat them in the decade of the 70s.
Wow.
They didn't for the entire day. They actually came close in the year where the Dolphins went undefeated, but they fell short, obviously. And there was a famous game where Tom Dempsey, the just recently deceased Tom Dempsey, it was really like a 30-yard field goal chip shot to win the game, and he missed. And then I think there was another one where like Nick Mickemeyer, who was another kicker, missed. I ended up being at the game that ended the streak, where the Leaf fans, the Bills fans jumped onto the Rich Stadium turf and ripped down the goalposts because it was. Well, back then that was nothing. This was.
No, it happened.
It had, right. And the funny thing was they had to put up the goalpost the next week because they played the Jets, and it took them. It was a touch and go whether they were going to get the goalpost up. But so he dominated the Bills in the 70s, but then in the 90s, up until he got let go, it was the Marino Dolphins against the Kelly Bills, and the Kelly Bills almost always kicked their ass. Mm-hmm. So they finally got their comeuppance on Shula. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he was a nice guy, and I'm not, I know that.
Yeah, I'm sure in everyday life he was fine. I had no problem with Don Shula away from that game, and that to me was just a desperate attempt to get back to another Super Bowl. And thankfully, John Riggins ran all over him, a former Jet, and I was rooting for the Redskins that entire time. Matter of fact, I watched that Super Bowl from the bowling alley, Mike, because I was in a bowling league, and that was on a Sunday.
In a bowling league?
And I won Most Improved Bowler that year. I still sucked.
From 12 to 20 pins?
No, I think I want to say I was probably, again, also realize the amount of alcohol that I used to imbibe during games. Our whole team was just bad. We didn't care what our score was. But I want to say I probably was averaging around 110 for about half the year, and I think it ended up with like a 130.
Wow.
And I got my high game of like, I want to say it was like a 197. I couldn't even get to 200. I was hoping. Couldn't do it.
Richard in the chat says, Russ Kingpin Cohen. Did your plastic hand get stuck in the ball?
No. I wish I had a plastic hand. It probably would have helped me. The problem with me in bowling was when I was really younger and I would go with friends, I was too weak. Like I just had to use a really light ball, and it was horrible. So I gave it up for a while, and then I was weightlifting and such. So then I definitely was strong enough. I had a natural curve, but then when the natural curve went away, that's when the problem started, because then I would either try and throw a straight ball and it would just, you know what happens. It goes straight through, or I would try and just create the curve. And you never knew where that thing was going, man, especially if I was trying to get split. So, yes, you can call me Kingpin, but it was my bowling experience.
See, I'm sure, as you know, lefties, and as we welcome Anthony Mangione to the show, lefties in bowling always have a natural curve.
Right.
It's just a question of whether they can control it. And that's always been my problem, because I would throw the ball and I would stand all the way over on the right side because the hook was so big, and it would, if it didn't snap into the pocket, it would go into the gutter. So now I've had to become more, stand over on the left side and sort of limit the curve. And then sometimes it'll go across the head pin and into the other, like the Brooklyn side. So it's,
are we comparing bowling and baseball curveballs right now? What are we doing?
No. What happened was we were talking Don Shula, and I said, and I talked about the AFC Championship game, but I said I was rooting for the Redskins in that Super Bowl because Riggins played for the Jets, and I happened to be bowling at the time that I was watching the Super Bowl because I was in a bowling league. And I told him I actually had this natural curve for a little while, and then it went away. And then when I was trying to artificially do it, it was a nightmare. So, but I did win Most Improved Bowler that year because I had such a horrible first half. It was funny.
I just can't imagine that league, Anthony. Do you want to, just before we start the show, I don't know if you guys have been following the documentary series on ESPN, The Last Dance, about the Chicago Bulls. I have, just simply because there's not much else on. Mm-hmm. But I was a sort of a minor. I'm more of a Celtics fan, but I appreciated Jordan, so I didn't hate them like I hate other best players of all time in other sports. And just to see, honestly, Isaiah Thomas was a punk with the Pistons.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
That was covered in one of the previous
episodes. And his personality has borne itself out in this part of his career in terms of his
look at the GM when he was a GM for the Knicks.
But he did a really good job because he was able to, again, with the Knicks, and in terms of, he did a really good job when he was with the Pistons of being able to sort of, he had the megawatt smile. So everybody, it was kind of like, some ways it was kind of like, it's kind of reminded me a little bit of Ray Leonard.
Yeah, a little bit.
Where there's something going on, but as you get older, you realize there was something going on that it was more of a mask,
right?
Or not even that, but even just to say that the real person was far more complicated.
You want to know who I would compare it to in hockey parlance? It would be Brendan Gallagher. Brendan Gallagher.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That fake smile, and you just want to punch his lights out.
Oh, that's a Montreal Canadian. Go figure.
Well, no, I mean Marchand too. I mean, he's got that too. But it's
Marchand, exactly. But Marchand,
right? There's no fooling with Gallagher.
And Gallagher, it a little bit. It's how he engages with people. I think off the ice that people are sort of willing to give him a mulligan on, sometimes on the stuff that goes on the ice. But if you're watching hockey, you know what he's doing.
But just the point I was going to make in a little start is the fact that Isaiah Thomas was basically ostracized from the Dream Team in '92 in Barcelona, and everybody's associated that with the very overt hatred between Jordan and Isaiah, stemming back to the 2 times that the Pistons beat the Bulls to go to the NBA final. It was everybody, Bird, Magic. Pippen, Jordan, they all hated him. None of them wanted him.
Magic didn't love Jordan either, though.
No, but there seemed
he did not, Mike.
No. I mean, they did cover that, Russ. They showed
how much though. How much?
They showed the practice before the Barcelona Olympics where they were playing basically a pickup game, and Jordan and Magic mouthing at each other. So there was, but then
more than that though.
Yeah, but at least they're not going down that road with him, because Magic is I think Jordan's the greatest. Now, maybe phony.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, it may be phony on both sides. Anyway, let's start the show. Hello, hockey world. Hi. Today is Monday, May 4th, 2020.
I'm Anthony Majoni from Sunrise Philly Magazine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology, holding this up because it annoys Mike.
Screw Yoda. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, where we will not say May the 4th. Never mind. Okay.
Don't worry. I'll slide it at the end of the show, Mike.
Stick it. Okay. All right.
You're angry about it.
Okay. Excuse me. At this moment, the NHL Board of Governors are virtually meeting. One of the items on the agenda is the proposal for the June entry draft. Now, Bob McKenzie apparently just said a few minutes ago on one of the TSN radio stations in Canada that a vote is not expected today. But Russ, for you first, and Anthony after that, it sounds like it's going that way.
It's happening. Look, Pierre LeBrun finally broke the whatever he was. I want to say the dam that he was holding up and holding hope for that it wasn't going to happen. He finally caved in the day before yesterday, and then today finally is writing like, okay, I know this is going to happen. And he was probably the most against it. It is going to happen, but as Gary Bettman said before, they're going to have to figure out the punishment for the Coyotes first. And so that is probably the number one thing that's being talked about right now is, since there's been a financial problem with the NHL in the pandemic, they probably won't give too much of a fine that way. But I imagine draft picks are going to be involved with this punishment, and that's going to probably be pretty severe. So they're going to do that first, and then they'll figure out the draft, and then we'll hear about it, and then people will whine, and then people will watch the draft. Now, my biggest problem with the whining is, if you really were watching the draft only for the trades, then you should never watch the draft. Like that's my thing. If that's really who you are as a hockey fan, you could read about the trades any minute. It's not like the draft is littered with trades every second.
But it goes down to, at the end of the day, the general populace not really knowing much about the prospects after you get to the first two or after the first three or four.
Who does anybody know from the NFL prospects? But they ended up watching this year.
But the difference is the interest level is going to be such that the players are going to be playing almost immediately. Whereas in the NHL, just like really, if you think about it, as much as I've enjoy covering the NHL draft, it's probably on the pantheon of the four. It's probably the third. Terms of bang for your buck,
no question.
What you're going to get so that, again, for most people, their engagement is going to be who made trades and when, what players may have moved. It's another trade. It's a pseudo trade deadline, so to speak. So I'm not going to knock people necessarily for that.
I am.
General. Well, you are, because you and I are, again, I or Mike we're draft nicks in this case, and that's going to happen.
No, you're right.
And it's going to happen, but I get it from other people's perspective.
No, that's fair.
So my concern is, again, Mike. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead.
So my biggest concern, again, is how they're handling all the conditions with all the trades, and how the league has already basically said that we've already analyzed all these deals, and this is the part where it sort of feels like somebody is going to get short-ended here. Somebody, and that's my biggest concern with this in terms of how they're going to try to handle this.
Apparently, and LeBron and Chris Johnston have been really good on this in terms of explaining what the NHL is suggested in terms of how they would resolve it. Now, the thing is, the memo that came out on Friday indicated the standings would be based on point percentage. Now, if the standings are based on point percentage, and in this example, the Leafs have the first round pick going to Carolina in the Marleau deal. If the only exception to that is if the pick ends up in the top 10. Well, they're ranked 20th in terms of point percentage, so then the pick would go to Carolina, and then Carolina, I guess, would give their pick to New York in the Brady Shea deal. But LeBron says, well, maybe, but there's sort of the language is not, etched in stone where the Leafs and Carolina can't talk to each other. Like, this is the thing. Why in the hell would the Leafs want to move the pick to next year when they're giving them a bottom 10 pick? They wouldn't. So, I mean, I don't think Carolina. Nothing says that, as things are currently constructed in that deal, and I think the New Jersey deal, the Blake Coleman deal, because the first round pick from the JT Miller deal went to the Devils, and the Canucks are in the playoffs based on point percentage. Whether either one of those deals would be affected by the situation. Now, conditional picks, where I had a question with, is conditional picks on deals that had nothing to do with playoff or non-playoff, that had to do with, say, for example, performance. Jack Campbell with the Leafs. If he wins 6 regular season games and the Leafs make the playoffs, the conditional pick becomes a second round pick. Well, he didn't get 6 games, and the Leafs will make the playoffs, so not everything fits there. And the only other exception in that thing was whether they re-signed Kyle Clifford. You could base the second-round pick condition on Clifford itself, and then that solves it. But Rob Blake may not want that, so there might be something going on in that situation.
Where are the people complaining about conditions that could never be met before? It's only during this time are people focusing on this. And I'll give you an example. And Doug McClain has told the story. When Columbus traded up to get Rick Nash, I think they traded with Florida. And I think one of the conditions was that the next year they would swap first-round picks as the condition. And then the next year Florida didn't have a first-round pick, and there was nothing to swap. So then basically he got to move up for free. Florida never complained about it. They never went to the league and petitioned and said, oh, this is so unfair. And you know what? That's exactly what's going to happen with some of these. And that, you know what? That's the risk you took when you made that deal. It's like anything else. It's like you go buy your car from a used car guy, you're taking a risk. Well, when you are taking a chance on what the future might be, you're taking a risk. Anytime you do a condition in a deal, period.
Yeah, I mean, you
can go back and look. I guarantee you, other than McLean, there are other places with other teams with other conditions that could never be met that just went by the boards too. There's just a lot more media coverage now.
No, I'm sure, but at the same time, with that media coverage comes even more additional scrutiny. That's going to come with that. That's what you got to take a look at. You can't just be taking a look at that as my little one. Keep going. We're recording.
We're live here on the HockeyBuzzcast.
In case y'all weren't entertained there, that was my little one.
Yes. That's great. That was great.
That was basically a visual presentation of Russ basically saying, too bad. There's the condition. Bye-bye.
Right.
So sad.
That was exactly the same as that.
Exactly.
Now, other interesting situations that are yet to be determined. The neutral site situation. Right now, as it is, apparently the NHL has been accepting basically proposals from a number of cities to. There you go, Jan. Sorry, no, it was just hanging there. It was the black screen. Up to 14 cities have made proposals to the league to be a host city of a neutral site city. They're going to wean that down to 4 before, but there is some question right now about whether they're going to even use neutral sites at all. Pierre LeBrun in his piece in The Athletic today, and I'll just quote this, he says, there does exist some sentiment among a few NHL team governors I've spoken to to the delay of the season and delaying it as long as possible, perhaps towards a September or October playoffs, so that they might at least it might be possible to play in the 16 home arenas instead of the 4 site setup, and maybe even allow a sprinkling of fans in the building. They have to let go this bull crap about the fans. It's not.
I don't think that's a large contingent, Mike. I think that's a few owners trying to push for that because they know what the money in their building means for them or for their regional coverage. But they're going to lose that battle. I think the 4 is going to happen. I did see some of the locations, and of course, it's got to be a place that has a couple of rinks there, so you can get in a fair amount of games. So
Carolina was mentioned. They have a couple.
Yeah, Raleigh was mentioned. Minnesota was mentioned.
Right.
Edmonton.
Minnesota seems like an obvious one.
Yeah, Edmonton, Vancouver, Toronto were mentioned in Canada. I'm skeptical about Toronto, but they have the rinks and the practice facilities and things like that. So
Vancouver is good, Mike. Maybe better in Toronto because I do think Toronto's too much of a hot spot. Vancouver may not be, and Pacific Coliseum is still in pretty good shape. So they do have 2 NHL rinks right there, technically.
Do the Vancouver Giants play it?
Yeah, the Giants play there.
Okay.
And
So, still got to work out the whole border travel issue also, right? Which
of course. Well, no matter
factor
what, guys are getting quarantined. Like, that's a guarantee. So anybody basically Trudeau basically came out and said, yeah, quarantine's in full effect. So guys are going to be quarantined no matter what.
Yeah.
At least at the beginning before traveling, if there is a season to travel that way. But I think they're going to keep everybody in one spot. I really don't think it's smart to have it in the U.S. and Canada. I think in the end of the day, you're going to have it in the U.S. because it's less travel and there's no quarantine issue then.
Well, two things. First of all, the concern about testing. It was sort of Scott Boras, the baseball agent, was on a New York radio station on Friday, and when the question was asked about testing availability, I think Michael Kay, who was the host, was asking, he says, there's not even enough tests for Congress right now for them to get back in session. And Boras basically said they have testing set up that every Major League Baseball player could be tested every day, and they have companies that are willing to do it, and they basically said that these companies would be willing to do 5 for every 1 player. They would do testing for 5 other people, so it's not just they're getting special treatment. It's going to be set up that way.
I question that. I do.
Okay, well, I'm taking him at his word, but what I'm saying is, if baseball has that set up, I am sure hockey has that set up because they can't really play unless they have that set up.
I don't think they have that set up. I think they have the word of a company saying we can do that. And right now, no company's been able to do that. That's the problem.
And again, it comes down to, if Congress, as you stated, if Congress can't get enough done, and we're talking 435 congressmen.
Plus 100 senators.
You've got 100 senators. So you're about 500. You're getting close to what would be about a league, in terms of personnel.
Besides everybody else, though, right? You have to worry about broadcasters and personnel.
All
and
those things.
So it's not
training.
Not just 500. It's probably a couple of thousand in terms of total based upon impacted individuals, right? So if you multiply that by 5,
right,
based upon 1 for every 5, 1 or by 6 technically, right? You're looking at least close to 20,000 tests, which I'm not quite sure how available that is right now.
Now the other thing I'm skeptical about
plus also Mike, couple things.
Go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
Two things that I saw. So the Post had a thing on Jeremy Lin in the paper yesterday, right? And they had a thing about because he's playing in China. I think China or South Korea in terms of testing, and he walked through in terms of the frequency of his testing, right? And they monitor everything. I mean, everything is being monitored there. You're monitored exposure, you're monitored everything. So the testing is to a certain extent available. You have to be willing also to give up the rights to have everything monitored, which people don't want to do necessarily. Then ESPN came out this morning, I think, and said they're broadcasting South Korean baseball games. Everybody's playing in the same location. I think they're all playing, or if they're not, they're playing at the same time. And I think the way it works is that if there is a positive test, I think a person's or shut down for 3 weeks. And if there's another one, then they basically, I think, will shut the league down. Because right now, the number of cases are down to the single digits in terms of positive tests in South Korea right now.
Yeah, I watched some of the preseason of that, and it looked like it was all in one location. But that's fine. I mean, I have no problem with it. I think it's good. But yeah,
I would rather watch that. I'd rather watch that than Blake Snell and Lucas Giolito playing MLB 20 on ESPN. My God.
Me too. I do think testing still is the issue. I mean, matter of fact, I just read an article where there were a bunch of tests given out and never actually sent in for like care homes. So just because you have these tests, it also has to be carried out 100%. And I think these companies that are telling Scott Boras, oh yeah, we could do that, until they're pressed into action, I am very skeptical that they actually can do that.
Well, I mean,
maybe in a month will be different.
They'll find out, because essentially there's going to be what he was referring to as a 30-day training camp for Major League Baseball players before they play one regular season game. And if they can't keep up the testing at that point with those players, then the whole thing is going to be shut down.
And you're also talking expanded rosters where you could have 30-man rosters, right?
There's 40. They're saying up to 40 because there's no minor leagues. They're going to have. I would say they're going to have. Jan. They're going to have to carry a squad of, I would say, 10 pitchers and at least 5 or 6 hitters. So that's
depends on how long the training camp is, right? Because if you could have a long enough training camp, pitchers might be able to build their arms back up, which is why they talk 30. But I could see it being a higher number also once games actually ever restart.
Now, the other thing I'm skeptical about when it comes to
actually, one more thing, Mike, because I just saw it. So the Texas National Guard's able to do 3,000 a day. That's it. That's for Texas. So if you're telling me they're not getting and they're hoping to get 3,000 a day done, right. If you're telling me there's not going to be preferential treatment for this, there's no possible way that could occur.
I think there's going to be preferential treatment, but based on what Boras said, I think they're going to couch that by saying, yes, we're going to help the public. Yeah, of course they're going to say they're going to help the public because they don't want to get called out for getting preferential treatment. But
I should say this is one mobile testing team in Texas, so maybe they have a few, but still they're only going to be able to, do that many.
Yeah.
I don't think
if it's possible that one of those Abbott Laboratory mini pet testing things goes to each major league team, that's what probably their ideal plan is. But whether that's feasible, who knows? But the other thing that I'm skeptical about regarding what LeBron reported, not because he got it wrong, but because it goes counter to everything that has been reported. Why would the NHL want to play September and October? Now, they're having the draft in June because TSN, Sportsnet, and NBCSN want something in June when there's nothing going on. Well, excuse me, what does NBC want in July and August without the Olympics? They want content. September and October are going to be loaded with maybe baseball, maybe the NFL, the Masters, the Kentucky Derby, all this stuff. July and August is barren. They want content then.
No, you're right. I mean, this is not getting pushed back to September. That's just nonsense. The only way they would push it back to September is if they had firm belief that it's a truck going by. If they had a firm belief that in like 4 places they could actually have full arenas with fans and they could split the revenue. Otherwise, there's no way.
It sounded like somebody was clearing their sinuses.
Big floor.
Penny for your thoughts.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Russ, the KHL. We're going to talk about that, but first talk about the salary cap thing. And I want to bring it to what happened today in terms of the Leafs signing a defenseman.
Yeah, so I get a weekly briefing from the KHL in my mailbox. And today's, what I found interesting was that they talked about their salary cap and what it was going to be. And for this season, it's basically 900 million rubles. I'm sure Anthony can extrapolate that and tell us what that is.
Just buy a converter app like everybody else uses.
I'm sorry, I'm wearing a Czech shirt, not a Russian shirt today.
Okay, but in case you can't, it's 12 million bucks.
Traitor.
So the fact that 12 million bucks is the number, there have been players already let go, can't be re-signed. In this particular memo, it said Nikolai Kumelin signed a team-friendly deal, which I was surprised that they actually, termed it that way. So that's what's going on right now. And I do want to give an update for this. There's a lot of nonsense going on with the Islanders and Ilya Sorokin. The stuff that I put out the other day really did come from Russia. What people are surmising that he is not going to sign because the 1920 season isn't over is garbage. It has nothing to do with it. It's like anybody else, any free agent that signs now who's not playing in the NHL this season.
Right.
It has no bearing on that. If he got what he wanted and everything was right, he would want to come over right away because he's going to have to go through a quarantine. He's going to find a place to live. And this is exactly what other Russians have done. They usually come that summer in advance so they can get themselves ready. So that other stuff is baloney.
Yeah, every single one. Every single prospect, every single entry-level contract, every single Swedish, Finnish, Russian free agent has signed for the 2020-2021 season.
Correct.
No one has signed 19 or 20. And Russ, when we were talking over the weekend, I'm saying this has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is the fact that they won't guarantee Sorokin a spot.
Right.
And that's the hard-headedness, and yes, it's gotten him places, so he can't take it away. That's not good. It's the hard-headedness of Lou Lamoriello.
Something will give there because otherwise he's not going to come. He'll sign back.
Right.
I think he is going to come. I really do think it's going to happen, but I do think he is going to win this leverage battle with Lou, and I don't think it's going to ever become public. I just think he'll come over and they'll talk about the schedule bonuses and everything will be fine. But this is the one battle I think Lou is going to lose, though.
I mean, Anthony, what I'm thinking is I can't wait till he does announce the contract, and I look at the details on Cap Friendly and see if it has a European assignment clause. Because if it does, and they dare send him to Bridgeport, he's gone.
Oh, absolutely! It's his
Go back
escape
to
valve.
Moscow.
Absolutely. The minute you see that on there, it's his escape valve. So they have to keep it. It's his way of making sure that they keep him up or keep him over on the Islander roster, or else that's that.
Right. And Jan, did Shesterkin have a return clause? Because he stayed down in Hartford for half a season before they called him up, at least. So I don't think he did. I don't think he did. Yeah, I think he was willing to stay down there because he knew the situation there with Lundqvist and with Georgiev. Jan,
He freeze.
You're breaking up. I didn't hear you say it again.
Okay, Shesterkin did not have a European return.
I think there was rumors of concern that he might go back. I don't know if he had that out necessarily, but I know there was definitely concern about whether or not, if they didn't call him up, whether or not he would potentially try to go back next year. That was definitely
next
concern
year
at the point in time, but it wasn't that he had, I think, the clause that would drive the ability to do so. They wanted to make sure, especially with what happened with Kravtsov, right? They wanted to make sure they didn't have the same type of similar situation happen with Shesterkin also.
Right.
Now, Jan, I wanted to bring this up because I was doing, and I'll get back to the Leaf signing in a second, but there was an article regarding Lundqvist on SNY's website this morning, and just reading between the lines of his remarks, and the remarks were taken from apparently I don't know if it's a Swedish radio show or what, but it basically says, nothing lasts forever. You have a goal image and a dream, but one must also adapt to the surroundings and the reality. This summer we'll see what happens. That doesn't sound like that sounds like he's gonna retire. That doesn't sound like he's gonna stick the fork in the Rangers if they try to muscle him into or try to buy him out or something. It sounds like he's maybe coming to grips with the situation.
I mean, I think he's always been somebody who understands the landscape, right? And I know there's a lot of talk where he has driven things in that locker room and driven the way certain things were handled and maybe took advantage of the power that he had within the organization, is a lot of the stuff I've heard behind the scenes that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has to see the writing on the wall, right? He look, we also don't know whether or not there's going to be a buyout. We don't know if there's going to be an amnesty or compliance buyout. If that happens, he clearly is one that we've talked about in the past that could be the individual who is bought out. Stallsman talked about, Brendan Smith's been talked about, but Lundqvist, $8.5 million, especially in a year where the cap's not rising, is a heck of a lot of money to take off your salary cap without it impacting your overall bottom line. So he clearly sees the writing on the wall. I mean, granted, the article also mentioned the comments by Matt Zuccarello that I wrote about where he defended him, right? And it's good that Lundqvist and Zuccarello have that relationship, and the Rangers may not have handled that negotiation the best way possible, even though he got a very sweet deal from Minnesota, a deal that nobody else seemed to were going to meet. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, look, Lundqvist didn't say much. As you talked about, you could read between the lines. Mm-hmm. You have to be blind not to see the writing on the wall. He clearly wants to end it in the right way possible. He's not going to admit to anything right now because he doesn't have to, right? This is a decision for after the season. And until the year's over, he can play it out as long as he can, just say the right things and then figure out the direction he's going to go in.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think because the season was elongated that he's thinking about it now. I don't think anything would have come out if we didn't have this pause. Mm-hmm. But because all that happened, I think now he's probably figuring, all right, I'll get in shape again. I'll come back for this year. But they're not treating me well. It's obvious. And they could say what they want, but they may be treating him with respect, but you also respect a player by playing him. And there were times when they could have played him and didn't. So at the end of the day, I do think he's going to walk away because I do think he wants to be a career Ranger. But I don't know if he's going to come running back. I think it's going to be a couple of years. Like Leach took 4 or 5 years until he decided he would go back because he was mad about being traded when he wasn't supposed to be. This is different, but it's still – this is going to irk him for a while. This is not something that Lundqvist is going to just shrug off and say, yeah, it's because I couldn't play, because he really got denied playing time this year, and that's what's bugging him.
Well, I wonder, because you've mentioned this before, Russ, whether he would go back to the SHL and
I think he will
play a year. I mean, or we've seen players like, you just use the Leafs as an example, like Darryl Sittler, Wendell Clark, Darcy Tucker, who have become team ambassadors. Whether he gets his money that way, as doing something for the Rangers and earning that $5 million over a longer term as a team ambassador.
I think he wants to. I think he wants to play though. And
he does.
I think he wants to play, and that's. Sure. I don't think he's just going to sort of sit there. He's going to go somewhere and he's going to play.
Yeah,
and again, it reminds me. It's kind of like, not quite the same. It's a little bit of apples and oranges, but Jágr going to Kladno and playing and continuing. That might be the way he closes things out. Or Markov going back to Russia, but of course Markov wanted to come back to the Canadiens, and that didn't work out. So that's where you have to kind of look at it from that perspective.
Just briefly on the Leafs, they signed now. Eckler talked about it earlier on the weekend regarding Mikko Lehtinen, who, as Russ was talking about, KHL teams sort of announced, or they knew the realities of the new salary cap, and it's very unusual that a team would announce the mutual termination of a contract on a defenseman who led the KHL in scoring. So that was sort of the reality that we can't afford to pay him what he'll get even in the NHL, probably on an entry level deal, with the cap being what it's going to be there. So Lehtinen becomes a free agent. There was talk of Winnipeg, of Montreal, particularly New Jersey being interested, and he signs a 1-year deal with the Leafs. Now, I'd be lying if I said I knew if this guy was going to be a big success in the NHL or what he's going to be. He could just be simply a depth defenseman. It's a good ad in terms of depth, according to the things that I reported on and wrote on and heard after the fact. Lehtinen did play the right side for Finland in the World Championships last year. He's primarily been a left shot defenseman. He led the KHL with 50 among defensemen with 59 points, was a top 10 guy. He's played on a World Junior Gold team. He's played on an SHL champion. So, the resume is there. He was never drafted, and this was the first opportunity He sort of opened eyes at the World Championships last year and then had this big season. So he was a regarded prospect, but he's 26. So there's not going to be like he's going to grow into this. Whatever he is right now, but he could be a 4, 5, 6 defenseman, and we know that's valuable. Yeah. But I mean, Russ, I think it's a no lose situation for the Leafs getting a European import like this.
No, it's a no lose, but I do feel like I need to say that if this were an uncapped league or the cap were $10 million higher, he probably wouldn't be getting an NHL job.
No.
But he's going to get this look and this chance because it is. And he might be able to make the most of it. Everything looks pretty good. It all depends on the transition when he gets here. Mm-hmm. And, that's going to be the telling part. I mean, Anthony and I saw Medvedev, who was older, come over, and the transition was horrible.
It was rough. Again, you're coming in from, as we all know, from European ice and in Russia. In this case, for him, it'll be in Finland because he played for Jokerit, right?
Yes.
So, there's something. Yeah, I think when you're a younger player, the transition happens quicker. If you're an older player, it takes a little bit longer. And Medvedev had its spurts, but we'll see. Again, if you're using, I think, Lettinen in that type of role of a 4 or 5 like a 4 or 5 right now for this season, Mike. I think you take that chance, especially considering some of your alternatives in system, which we know where you're going with that, Mike.
And it's always good when you have when you have a countryman like they have Kasperi Kapanen, who played internationally for Finland. I'm sure they've probably been on teams together, but there's a couple Finns on the Marlies, so it'll make his transition to the NHL, or at least culturally, a little easier.
Right. But you have to have those things in place, just like Philadelphia had in getting Linus Sandin when you already had Robert Haig here.
Right. And who he was friends with, and
exactly. Right. So that's something you have to look in there, especially when you're talking about.
But I see. I think this is, and maybe things get overblown. All of a sudden, this is the world's greatest prospect. Where and then I think Russ was telling me somebody was sort of shooting him down because he signed with the Leafs. So if he signed with the Devils, he'd be the best thing since sliced bread.
There's that too, which is just Leafs blowback. Which again, I also saw the other way where he was the best European defenseman available out there, and it's like you don't really know that. There's probably other guys that are really good that maybe just re-signed. It's a bit of a stretch to say that.
But I think the reality here is, and I call it the Leafs European pipeline, and I think we see the blueprint of what Dubas is doing. The reality is right now he's got that core group that's making $40 million. He's going to pay other players, decent money, but he's limited. So what he has set up, and it's with Mikheyev last year, and Mikheyev was a little younger, so he had the 1 year of salary arbitration. Then he becomes a UFA. Barabanov, who they signed in April, and now Lettinen. They become unrestricted free agents next year. He's basically telling them, come over. You get to play with Matthews and Tavares and Marner. You can inflate your regular season.
Well, he doesn't say inflate.
No, you can. No, but you can enhance your regular.
Much better, Michael.
I broke out my Roget's thesaurus. You can enhance your statistics. You can be seen nationwide in Canada, and we know that the scouts basically stop in Toronto every single game. So you're gonna have eyes on you for the entire year, and if you do well, it's going to really help you, maybe with the Leafs on a new deal, but possibly, if not, with other teams on a new deal. And that is self-perpetuating because Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares are going to be there for years, and players are going to want to come over and put themselves in the best position for success. So I'm not saying Barabanov is guaranteed to succeed. I'm not saying Lettinen is guaranteed.
No, and I'll give you a good example, Mike. Like, because of fantasy hockey, I've been able to watch some of these marginal free agents come over for like $925,000 and see what they can do. And so, like, last year, Edmonton had Gaetan Haas, right? He came over from Switzerland, $925, undrafted, 10 points in 58 games. Like that, unfortunately, that is the norm. What others are talking about is not the norm.
Right.
Because a lot of these guys come over and very few of them have big years.
Right.
So, that's really the reality of it.
Mikheyev is the exception rather than the rule. I mean,
Right.
even in half a year, I think he had 23 or 24 points in like 45 games, and then he had the laceration on his wrist. He's not going to have much of a case in terms of salary arbitration because he didn't play an entire year, but his points per game will get him probably a significant raise. The Leafs will probably want to sign him to a longer-term extension and stretch it out and get some cost certainty there. But these players, they put themselves in a position to make bigger money. And maybe it's like Haas. I think Haas re-signed with Edmonton a couple weeks ago for less than the ELC amount, but it was a one-way deal. So he's guaranteed like $900,000.
So here's another one. And this guy also I tracked last year from Finland, 28, Jani Hakanpaka.
Mm-hmm.
And he played for Anaheim. He only got in 5 games. You never know. You just never know. Something I noticed on Twitter, Mike, I'd like to bring up. Because now we know that the draft is going to have the same odds as 2012. For someone like Frank Valley to now say in a tweet, well, the Red Wings are going to make out like bandits. Okay, the Red Wings stink. They should make out like bandits. Their odds went up from 19% to 57%. Doesn't take away the fact that they stink.
Yeah, what this guarantees them is 1 or 2.
Right, and that's fine.
So they're going to get Byfield or they're going to get LaFreniere.
People like the idea, though, of lottery chaos, and that's what you forget. And this takes out, this basically in most people's minds rewards the Red Wings for having a horrific season.
Right.
And that's exactly what the league had been trying to avoid for a long time.
But at the end of the day, it's
the odds are still in their favor that they would likely get that pick. But still, there was a chance that you might
a good example. So then,
15th.
Yeah, sorry. So then a good example is like a Winnipeg writer goes, well, we only have a 3% chance. Well, that's all you really deserve if you think about it. I mean,
but they don't have a 3% chance of getting the number 1 pick.
It's
moving up 4 slots.
Right. Which again, that's fine. I mean, again, I get it. It is fun, like Anthony said. But when you have a year like this, and to be fair, I don't think Detroit tanked the whole year. I don't.
They just suck. They're terrible.
They were competitive they try to compete for probably about 15 games.
They were not artificially enhanced. They were not a tanker on steroids. They traditionally sucked. They were bad.
They started the season out, blew out all 4 wheels within 20 games, and I think and have been became known as Sparky the truck hero.
the Detroit Dead Things.
Pretty much back to
that. I mean, I'm not going to yell because they have a 57% chance. And who is the next highest chance?
I believe it was Anaheim or LA. I think it was LA.
LA. And LA probably hurt their chances because they played well for the last couple of weeks.
Well, I mean, Ottawa's got 2 picks in the top 5, so I think they have the next best chance of getting a first or second pick. So but they could get 2 and 4 or 2 and 3.
If you got 2 and 4 in this draft, you're still doing great.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to screw up 2 and 4 in this draft. Trust me. So again, I think Anthony's right. I think it's because we've seen teams. What did the Flyers move up 8 slots that time? And I think just because those things can't happen doesn't mean that this is bad the way it's being done. I honestly think it's the only way it could be done. You knew the draft odds were going to change.
Right.
We talked about it on this show more than once, and I didn't know what they would change it to. And so it did make sense that they went back to a previous year because it's easier that way. Come on.
Was that the Yankee fan, Kaya?
No, Kaya is not a Yankee fan.
Yes, she is. She contacted me on Zoom and she told me that you were putting that Mets hat on her she was protesting that, Russ. Okay, just to finish out the show here. I've been doing a series of articles regarding players that would be bought out if there is a compliance bot. Now, the funny thing is that I heard over the weekend that the NHL owners have really pushed back on the possibility that if there is some sort of correction based on revenue, that the last thing they want to do is a compliance buyout. But I'm gonna finish the series of articles anyway, because I think it's interesting. But right now it's like they would probably opt for the Kurt Overhart exceptional player, or a luxury tax, or even some sort of exemption, over a compliance buyout. But if there was a compliance buyout, I looked at 4 teams in the Metro last week, and this week I looked at the other 4 teams, and the first one was Washington, and I looked at their roster, and I'll just go through these quickly and ask you what you guys think. With Washington, I think the 2 most buyoutable contracts, the ones they would want to get out of the way, one is Richard Panik, who's making $2.75 million for another 3 years, and the other is Nick Jensen, who they traded with Detroit for. They immediately signed him to a 4-year deal, and then this deadline, Anthony, we were hearing Nick Jensen rumors all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were.
So they need, if that's not big savings. One is 2.5 a year, the other is 2.75.
But they're going to lose Holtby's salary. They're going to save on that.
Yeah, that's where it's going to come off probably.
But Ovechkin's contract is up after next year, so every dollar counts, and they'll probably have to pay him more than, I think he's making a little over 9. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to have to make 10 or 11 at least. 10
or 11. I think he's going to make like 13. He's going to, whatever the limit's going to be to make that 20% of the cap, that's probably what he's making.
So he's going to get back pay, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
So percentage-wise, it won't be as much as McDavid, but money-wise, it will be.
Yes.
Here's the one I want to get both your inputs on. Philadelphia, and I asked Bill Meltzer his opinion. Mm-hmm. I said Voracek. Bill said Van Riemsdyk. I think Voracek because of the term, and he said since he signed the big contract, he had an 81-point year. This is the year he signed the 8-year extension. He had an 85-point year 3 years ago, but every year after that, every year before or after that was between 55 and 65 points. That's not bad. That's good. It's not $8.25 million. It's not worth that much.
No, but the thing is with Jake Voracek is that you have a player who's been consistently in your top 6,
right,
and gives you that top 6 production, and at his best is one of the better NHL forwards in the NHL. Whereas with James Van Riemsdyk, he was pretty much slotted into almost a third line left wing role, and only was playing second line, honestly, because of what happened to Oscar Lindblom. He would not have had that opportunity. So I would agree with Bill in this circumstance that if it's between the 2. I think they would be more likely to James Van Riemsdyk would be more likely than Jake Voracek. I think Voracek is, especially now that they don't have Wayne Simmons there, he's kind of also the truth teller. He's one of the truth tellers in the locker room.
Right.
And I think core-wise, that's extremely important. Now, he's the guy I think who's willing, if he needs to be a bad cop, will do that.
Right.
And and there's other factors I think that go into it, but also from the production standpoint. Jake was getting honestly. Jake was getting. I looked like as rocky an early start as he had with Elaine with Vigneault at the beginning.
Right.
He seemed to have come around on how to play and was playing really good hockey before the quarantine happened.
Russ, JVR's a year older, but Voracek's got a year more in terms of term, and he's making $1.25 million more. So I don't know in terms of saving, in terms of where they want to spend their money next. What that would mean, but I mean the point is that Van Riemsdyk is basically a third line left winger, and Anthony's right. Voracek is in their top 6.
I think it's just based on production too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly from a production standpoint, consistent production standpoint.
Yep.
You know what you're going to get when Jake is on. He's going to impact. How much he's going to impact the game. Whereas JVR, I think. As hard as I think he worked this year to develop to really play well defensively. JVR's area of scoring is in one spot. His area of impact is in one spot, and that is in his office in front of the net. That's where he's most effective. Whereas Jake can affect the game in a number of different areas.
Right. In 66 games, he's down 8 points from last year, which was under 50 points, and to me, it's not worth the money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Exactly.
And when you're crunching numbers in the salary in this case, they're both have had their value to Philadelphia this season. But if in your scenario, Mike, if it's either or. They go Jake over JVR.
We'll do the other 2 teams real quickly because I know we got to end it right in about a couple minutes. Pittsburgh, I still don't know what the hell Jim Rutherford.
I know what Mike Rutherford.
Yeah, Mike Rutherford was playing bass on Abacab. What Jim Rutherford, he must have had like a psychedelic portobello mushroom sandwich the day before he signed Jack Johnson to that 5-year contract. To me, that's the no-brainer. The other one might be Hornquist, because he signed a 5-year deal. He's 2 years into it. He's 33 years old, and his numbers have gone down the last 2 years. But he is a tough guy in front of the net.
I think you factor in the other intangibles and the other elements of his game versus what you have out of Jack, where your money can be much better spent in that circumstance for what you're getting.
I'll never live down the Mike Rutherford comment. The other one is Carolina, and sorry, I have to bring up the ex-Leafs. Jake Gardiner is a bust. -24, worst plus minus on the team. They thought they got a bargain.
Just clip that because you've been waiting to say that for a year.
I've been saying it for 4 years. The guy is.
You've been really waiting to say it since he's left the Leafs. So
he was a bust with the Leafs. He's a bust without the Leafs.
He wasn't a bust with the Leafs.
He was terrible
offensively. He did produce points, Mike. There's different.
Mike. Let's be honest. Who is it that gets your goat the most, Martin Marincin or Jake Gardiner? Let's get it out on the table right now.
They're different because Gardiner actually has talent. Marincin does.
Which galls you even more, doesn't it?
Right, because if he was a more intelligent player, I think his hockey IQ is probably in single digits.
Oh, listen, Philadelphia, we went through this with Yoni Pitkinen, so.
Yeah. He's got unbelievable physical ability. He's a great skater. He's got a good shot. He just reads plays terribly, and he puts himself in bad positions. But $4.05 million for another 3 years, and his
24 this year, only 24 points. So his points are even down from last year. No, actually, it's probably on pace, maybe even a little up from the 30. But he's not a 50-point guy anymore, so you're right. It's right.
And the other one was James Reimer, because James Reimer is their backup. He's making $3.4 million, and Nedeljkovic could be their backup next year. Yeah. So with a year left, and you're paying your backup more than your starter and Peter Mrazek, you buy out Reimer.
But it's only a year.
It's only a year, I know, but I didn't see a contract that was so onerous that I would want to buy it out. It's like, I don't want to buy out Teravainen.
But for a year, you could send him in the A. Gardner's is longer. I still would do Gardiner.
Yeah, right. I think you do Gardiner.
Right, definitely Gardiner would be number one. But anyway, all right. Good show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Jan Levine. For Anthony Mingione, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.